A world in crisis. Everything is changing. No empire lasts forever. No civilization stands still. History is filled with nations that once thrived, only to crumble into dust. Rome, the Ottoman Empire, the Khmer civilization. At their peak, they seemed invincible. Then, one by one, they fell. Now, in the 21st century, we are witnessing a new cycle of collapse. Economies are crumbling, governments are failing, war, poverty, corruption, and environmental destruction threaten millions. And yet, most people ignore the warning signs. They believe their nation is different, that it will always be strong. But Buddhism teaches us a different truth. Nothing is permanent. The Buddha called this Anicca, the law of impermanence. Everything that rises will one day fall. Even the greatest nations are subject to this universal law. The question is, which country is next? Why you need to watch this video. Today, we will uncover 10 Asian nations that are on the brink of collapse. Some are economic giants, others are struggling states, but all of them face serious threats that could lead to their downfall by 2025. And more importantly, we will explore these crises through the wisdom of Buddhism. Why do nations fall? What mistakes do they repeat? And is there a way to prevent collapse before it's too late? This is not just about politics or economics. This is about understanding karma on a national scale. Every country has created causes through its actions. Now, they must face the consequences. Stay with us until the end. We will not only expose the problems but also offer Buddhist solutions. By the time you finish this video, you will see the world differently. You will understand why history repeats itself, and how we can break the cycle. But first, let me introduce you to this channel. Welcome to Buddhist Philosophy. This is Buddhist Philosophy, a channel where we explore timeless wisdom in a modern world. We believe that Buddhism is not just about temples and meditation. It is a powerful tool for understanding reality, for making sense of chaos, for seeing through illusion. Every week, we dive deep into Buddhist teachings and apply them to real-world issues. War, economy, leadership, society. If you are seeking clarity in an uncertain world, you are in the right place. Subscribe now, because the world is changing faster than ever, and the wisdom of the Buddha has never been more relevant. Now, let's begin our journey. Let's uncover the hidden karma of these nations, and let's see what we can learn before it's too late. The countdown begins. Which country will collapse first? Is it the economic giant struggling with a failing housing market? Is it the war-torn nation, trapped in endless conflict and corruption? Or is it a country that no one expects? As we count down from number 10 to number 1, you will see patterns emerge. You will recognize the same mistakes, repeated over and over again. But do not lose hope, because within these crises, there are also solutions, ancient wisdom that can still save nations today. If only they listen. Let's begin. 10 Asian nations on the brink of collapse. China, the cost of material attachment. The illusion of endless growth. China stands as a global powerhouse. For decades, it has been a symbol of rapid progress. Skyscrapers rise overnight. High-speed rail networks stretch across vast landscapes. Factories churn out goods at an unimaginable pace. The world looks at China and sees strength, power, and dominance. But beneath this towering success, cracks are forming. The economy is slowing down. The housing market is collapsing. Debt is piling up at an unsustainable rate. Evergrande, once a titan in real estate, now faces financial ruin. Local governments, once flush with cash from land sales, now struggle to survive. Meanwhile, an aging population threatens long-term growth. Fewer young workers, more retirees. An economy built for expansion now faces the weight of its own ambition. And then there are the geopolitical tensions. The trade war with the US. The battle for technological supremacy. The pressure from global markets. China once seemed unstoppable. Now, it stands at a crossroads. And the question looms, what happens when an empire built on endless growth stops growing? Buddhist perspective, the illusion of permanence. The Buddha taught that everything is impermanent. What rises must fall. What is built will one day crumble. Yet, China's economic model is built on the illusion of endless expansion. More factories, more skyscrapers, more wealth. But chasing material success without ethical balance leads to suffering. It creates a false sense of permanence, a belief that prosperity will last forever. But nothing lasts forever. Empires rise and fall, and the more we cling to wealth and power, the more we fear losing them. China's leadership believes that growth is the key to stability. But Buddhism teaches that true stability comes from balance. Not from expansion, not from control, but from wisdom, compassion, and ethical leadership. Yet, China has prioritized GDP over human well-being, wealth over wisdom, production over peace, and now, it faces the karmic consequences of greed and imbalance. The same greed that fueled its rise may also bring its downfall. The story of the Golden Palace. Long ago, there was a wealthy merchant. He was the richest man in the city. His wealth came from his vast network of workers. They labored day and night, building his empire, but the merchant was never satisfied. He wanted more gold, more land, more power, so he built a golden palace. A structure so grand, so magnificent, that no one could ignore it. People marveled at its beauty. They envied his success. But inside the palace, the merchant was troubled. He feared losing everything. He feared thieves, economic collapse, and betrayal. And he failed to see the suffering of his workers. They were overworked, underpaid, and exhausted. One day, they could take no more. They revolted. The Golden Palace, once a symbol of power, became a monument of failure. And as the walls crumbled, so did the merchant's fortune. He was left with nothing. His greatest mistake, believing that wealth alone could bring lasting happiness. China's parallel with the Golden Palace. China's real estate market mirrors the merchant's Golden Palace. For years, developers built luxury apartments, office towers, and massive cities. They believed that as long as they built, people would buy. As long as money flowed, prosperity would last. But they built too much, too fast, too recklessly. They ignored the struggles of everyday citizens. They relied on debt, speculation, and government intervention. Now, the market is crumbling. People are left with empty homes, unpaid loans, and shattered dreams. The palace is collapsing, and China faces the same lesson as the merchant. True strength does not come from buildings and numbers. It comes from stability, wisdom, and ethical governance. The lesson, beyond GDP and growth. A nation's power is not in its GDP. It is not in its factories, buildings, or trade deals. It is in its people, in their well-being, in their security, in their wisdom and compassion. China has built an empire of industry and commerce. But has it built an empire of stability and ethics? Has it invested in its people's happiness, well-being, and future? Or has it fallen into the trap of endless material pursuit? History tells us that nations fall not from external threats, but from internal imbalance. When greed outgrows wisdom, when expansion outweighs sustainability, when leaders prioritize control over compassion, China still has a choice. It can seek balance, or it can continue chasing the illusion of permanence. The Buddha once said, "Contentment is the greatest wealth." If China remembers this, it may still avoid collapse. But if not, it will simply become another empire lost to history. What's next? China is not the only nation facing collapse. There are others, nations trapped in debt, corruption, war, and division. Some are on the brink of economic ruin. Others are consumed by political instability. And one country, ranked even higher than China, may not even exist in the next 50 years. Which country is it? Stay with us as we reveal the next nation on the list. You won't believe what's coming next. Pakistan, the weight of karma in leadership. A nation in crisis. Pakistan is struggling. The economy is collapsing. Inflation has soared past 27%. The value of the rupee has plummeted. Families can barely afford food. Businesses are shutting down. Jobs are disappearing. And the government? Divided, corrupt, unstable. Political infighting has paralyzed the nation. Every leader blames the last. Every government inherits a deeper crisis. Scandals erupt. Protests fill the streets. People cry for change, but none comes. The country is caught in a vicious cycle. A cycle of bad leadership and worsening suffering. This is not a coincidence. It is the weight of karma. A nation's fate is shaped by its leaders' actions. And when leaders abandon righteousness, the people suffer. Buddhist perspective, the karma of unethical leadership. The Buddha spoke of righteous leadership. In the Cakkavatti Siyanada Sutta, he warned of a great truth. A king who fails in his duties will bring suffering to his land. A leader must rule with wisdom and compassion. Not greed, not corruption, not tyranny. But in Pakistan, these values have been forgotten. The leaders seek power, not peace. They chase wealth, not wisdom. They cling to control, not compassion. And the result? A nation drowning in its own karma. Economic collapse, social unrest, endless political chaos. What Pakistan faces today is not just a financial crisis. It is a moral crisis. A crisis born from decades of failed leadership. A crisis that cannot be solved by money alone. Only by returning to righteousness can Pakistan break free. But is there still time? Or has the damage already been done? The story of King Ashoka. Over 2,000 years ago, there was a powerful king. His name was Ashoka. He was strong, feared, and ruthless. He expanded his empire through war and bloodshed. Victory after victory, land after land, until one day, he fought the Battle of Kalinga. It was a brutal war. Thousands died, cities burned, the rivers ran red with blood. And when the battle ended, Ashoka stood among the ruins. He saw the dead, the wounded, the orphans, and for the first time, he felt the weight of his actions. He saw the karma of his greed for power, and it crushed him, so he made a decision. He would change. He would abandon conquest. He would rule with dharma, righteousness. He turned away from war and embraced peace, wisdom, and compassion. He built hospitals. He supported the poor. He spread Buddhist teachings across Asia. And he became known as Ashoka the Great. His empire thrived, not because of war, but because of justice and wisdom. His story is proof. A leader's karma shapes the fate of an entire nation. Can Pakistan's leaders learn from Ashoka? Pakistan stands where Ashoka once stood. It has seen war. It has seen destruction. It has seen the suffering of its people. But will its leaders choose a new path? Or will they continue down the road of corruption, division, and greed? History offers a lesson. Those who ignore the suffering of their people will fall. A true leader does not serve himself. He serves his nation. He uplifts the poor. He seeks wisdom, not wealth. If Pakistan's leaders understand this, the country still has hope. If not, its karma will continue to unfold, and the suffering will deepen. The lesson: leadership is a sacred duty. A nation's prosperity is not built on weapons, not on money, not on power. It is built on righteousness, on leaders who serve, not exploit, on wisdom that puts the people first. Pakistan still has a choice. Its leaders can learn from Ashoka, or they can continue the cycle of suffering. The choice will shape its destiny. But time is running out, because another nation faces an even greater crisis. A nation that, just last year, was on the brink of total economic collapse. A nation whose people took to the streets, demanding change. But change never came, and now, the crisis has only grown worse. Which country is next? Stay with us to find out. Myanmar, the karmic effects of oppression. A nation in turmoil. Myanmar is burning. Once a country of promise, now a land of fear. Since the 2021 coup, nothing has been the same. The military seized control. They silenced voices. They crushed protests. And the people? They fought back. Streets turned into battlefields. Homes became war zones. Families were torn apart. Businesses shut down. Foreign investors fled. The economy collapsed. Millions now live in poverty and uncertainty. But the generals refuse to let go. They cling to power. They tighten their grip. They believe force can bring stability. But history tells a different story. No regime built on fear and oppression has ever lasted. Their time will come, because karma is relentless. Buddhist perspective: violence breeds more violence. The Buddha warned us, hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. Myanmar's rulers have chosen hatred. They rule with guns, not wisdom, with fear, not compassion. They believe they can control the people forever. But force creates resistance, oppression creates rebellion, and violence only breeds more violence. The law of karma is simple. What you give, you receive. A ruler who sows fear will live in fear. A government that spreads suffering will face suffering. And Myanmar's leaders are walking the path of self-destruction. Their power is an illusion, like a sandcastle built by the tide. It may stand today, but tomorrow, it will be washed away. Because history has seen this before. And history never forgets. The story of King Ajatasattu. Long ago, there was a prince named Ajatasattu. He was ambitious, impatient, hungry for power, but his father, the king, stood in his way, so he betrayed him, he overthrew him, and he locked him in a dark prison. Day after day, the king suffered. He cried for his son's mercy. But Ajatasattu ignored him. One night, the old king died in his cell, and Ajatasattu became ruler. But instead of victory, he found paranoia. He saw enemies everywhere. He feared betrayal. He trusted no one. His mind became his prison. His own son despised him. And one day, just as he had done to his father, his own people turned against him. His rule ended in fear, regret, and downfall. The karma of his actions followed him to the grave. Myanmar's paranoia and the fate of tyrants. Myanmar's rulers are walking Ajatazachi's path. They betrayed their own people. They rule through force, not wisdom. And now, they live in fear. Fear of uprisings. Fear of revolution. Fear of losing control. They silence opposition. They jail critics. They hide behind weapons and soldiers. But deep down, they know the truth. The more they oppress, the more the people resist. The tighter they hold on, the closer they are to losing everything. Because no power built on violence and fear has ever survived. History proves this. The karma of tyranny is inevitable collapse. The question is not if Myanmar's regime will fall. The question is when. The lesson, compassion is the only path to stability. A government built on oppression cannot last. A nation ruled by fear will not thrive. True leadership is not about control. It is about service. The Buddha taught that a righteous ruler leads with wisdom and justice. Not with greed. Not with violence. Not with ego. Myanmar still has a choice. It can continue on this path of destruction. Or it can break free. It can choose dialogue over war. Compassion over cruelty. Justice over dictatorship. The fate of the country depends on this choice. But time is running out. Because Myanmar is not the only nation on the edge. There is another. A nation where hunger and desperation have reached a breaking point. A nation where its leader prioritizes weapons over food. A nation where people live in fear of their own government. Which country is next? Stay with us as we reveal the next name on the list. North Korea, the illusion of control. A nation in chains. North Korea is trapped. Not by outsiders. Not by enemies. But by its own leaders. For decades, the country has been isolated. Closed borders. Blocked information. A land frozen in time. The people suffer in silence. Food is scarce. Electricity is unreliable. Basic necessities are a luxury. And yet, the government tells them everything is fine. They say North Korea is strong and independent. That they don't need the world. That their leader is supreme. Unquestionable. Eternal. But reality tells a different story. Behind the grand parades and military displays, the cracks are widening. The economy is collapsing. Hunger is rising. Desperation is growing. And fear is the foundation of it all. The government does not lead. It controls. Through propaganda. Through violence. Through isolation. But history has proven one thing. Control never lasts forever. And North Korea is no exception. Buddhist perspective. The ego's desire for absolute power. The Buddha warned against ego and control. A ruler who leads through fear creates his own suffering. He becomes a prisoner of his own power. The more he tries to hold on, the more fragile his rule becomes. This is North Korea's curse. Kim Jong-un believes he is untouchable, that his control is absolute. But no leader rules forever. No power is permanent. The law of impermanence, Anicca, applies to all things. Even dictators, especially dictators, the more they fear losing control, the harsher they become. They suppress, they punish, they isolate. But the more they isolate, the more vulnerable they become. North Korea has become like a castle built on sand. From the outside, it looks strong, but beneath the surface, it is crumbling. And one day, the tide will come, the castle will collapse, and all that will remain is a lesson in the dangers of control. The tyrant king who feared his own people. Long ago, there was a tyrant king. He ruled with an iron fist. He feared rebellion. He distrusted his own people. So he built high walls around his palace. No one could enter without permission. No one could leave without surveillance. He banned books. He controlled speech. He executed anyone who questioned him. For years, his power remained unchallenged. Or so he thought. One night, a servant whispered a rumor. That outside the walls, the people were starving. That they no longer feared him. That they were ready to fight. The king panicked. He ordered more guards. He built taller walls. He banned all gatherings. But no amount of control could stop what was coming. One night, the walls fell. The people stormed the palace. And the king, once mighty and feared, was dragged into the streets. Not by invaders. Not by foreign enemies. But by his own people. North Korea's walls are cracking. North Korea has built the same walls of fear. They tell their people the outside world is evil. That their leader is their only protector. That they must stay loyal, no matter the cost. But hunger is stronger than propaganda. Desperation is stronger than fear. And in the dark corners of the country, dissent is growing. More people are questioning. More people are resisting. The cracks are appearing. And once the walls start to break, there is no stopping them. Kim Jong-un's government is living on borrowed time. Because power built on control, fear, and deception cannot last. It is only a matter of time before the truth breaks through. The lesson: a leader's wisdom determines his legacy. A leader's true power is not in his army, not in his weapons, not in his ability to silence his people. It is in his wisdom, humility, and service to others. The Buddha taught that great rulers lead with compassion, not fear. They do not trap their people. They do not hoard power. They do not suppress knowledge. Because in the end, the people decide a ruler's fate. North Korea still has a choice. It can open its doors. It can choose peace over paranoia. It can build trust instead of walls. But if it does not, then it will follow the path of all tyrants before it. And when it falls, it will fall harder than anyone expects. Because the greater the illusion, the more painful the collapse. And North Korea's illusion is starting to fade. What's next? North Korea is not the only nation trapped by its own choices. There is another, a country torn apart by decades of war. A country ruled by leaders who cling to power, not progress. A country where suffering has become a way of life. A country where hope is running out. Which country is next? Stay with us as we reveal the next nation on the list. What can we learn? The rise and fall of nations. History repeats itself. Empires rise. Empires fall. No country, no matter how powerful, remains unchanged forever. Everything is subject to impermanence, Anicca. Nothing lasts. Not wealth. Not power. Not even the greatest civilizations. But behind every collapse, there are patterns. Patterns of greed, corruption, and poor leadership. Patterns of ego, control, and oppression. And patterns of ignorance, ignoring the suffering of the people. These are not coincidences. They are the consequences of karma. The three great lessons of history. Through these stories, we see three fundamental truths. Truths that apply not just to nations, but to our own lives. Impermanence, Anicca, nothing is forever. Everything changes. Power shifts. Economies rise and fall. Leaders come and go. A nation that does not adapt will crumble. A leader who believes he is untouchable will fall. And the people who forget history will repeat it. 2. Karma, actions shape destiny. Nations, like individuals, create their own karma. Good governance brings stability. Corruption brings collapse. Compassion builds trust. Oppression breeds rebellion. What you give, you receive. This law applies to all leaders, citizens, and countries alike. Wisdom and compassion, the foundation of true leadership. A great leader serves, not controls. He listens, not dictates. He leads with wisdom, not fear. A government that prioritizes its people will thrive. A government that exploits its people will perish. This is the lesson history teaches us again and again. And yet, so many refuse to learn. What does this mean for us? History is not destiny. The past does not define the future. We, as individuals and nations, have the power to change. Through right action, Samakamanta. Through wise leadership. Through ethical living. The choice is always ours. To repeat the mistakes of the past. Or to build a new future based on wisdom, integrity, and compassion. Which will we choose? Your journey of understanding. If you've made it this far, you are different. You are not just a passive observer of history. You are someone who seeks wisdom, who questions, who wants to understand the deeper patterns of life. That is rare, and that is powerful, because knowledge is the first step toward change. By understanding these lessons, you are already ahead of those who ignore reality. Ahead of those who live in illusion. Ahead of those who think that history does not concern them. But knowledge alone is not enough. The real question is, what will you do with it? Take this wisdom into your life. These lessons are not just for governments. They are for you, for your decisions, for your relationships, for your personal growth. Ask yourself, where in my life am I clinging to illusion? How can I act with more wisdom and integrity? Am I learning from history? Or repeating mistakes? Because just as nations rise and fall, so do individuals. And just as leaders shape countries, we shape our own destinies. Everything begins within. The world changes when we change. And when we act with wisdom, we help create a better future. For ourselves, for our families, for our communities, for the world. Thank you for being here. I want to take a moment to acknowledge you. For your time, for your curiosity, for your willingness to seek deeper truths. In a world filled with distractions, that is rare, and I do not take it for granted. Thank you for choosing to think critically. Thank you for being part of this journey of wisdom. Thank you for supporting Buddhist philosophy. Together, we are building a space for deeper understanding. A place where wisdom meets reality. A place where ancient teachings help us navigate the modern world. Stay connected. Stay mindful. If this video resonated with you, don't stop here. There is so much more to explore. So many more stories. So many more lessons. Join us. Subscribe to Buddhist philosophy. Like this video. Share it with those who seek wisdom. And if you have thoughts, leave a comment. Tell us, which country's story resonated most with you? What lessons stood out to you? And most importantly, how will you apply them in your life? Because wisdom is meant to be lived, not just learned. Until next time, stay mindful, stay compassionate, and keep seeking truth. The world is changing, but with wisdom, we can change for the better.